This is the jpeg2RAW podcast. I'm Mike Howard. I'm broadcasting from the basement of Knob Studios here in sunny and hot Atlanta. jpeg2RAW is a photography podcast for the amateur photographer. You can find us on the web at www.knobstudios.com, and you can contact the show by emailing us at podcast@knobstudios.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Flickr, and Twitter by searching for jpeg2RAW, or just follow the links on our website. This is jpeg2RAW, show number 26, January, what is today, 24th?
24th.
January 24th. I got my usual co-host, Tim Kemperle.
Good evening. Very good. How's it going?
All right. And Kathleen Bowie.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Good to have you here again.
Kathleen. And before we get to our guest tonight, Kathleen, you should catch us up with what happened at the end of last week's show.
Well, that was a little crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So what happened was I'm trying to talk about shooting in manual. I don't even remember what I was talking about. And out of the corner of my eye, I see something shoot across the floor and then run back. And I panicked because I'm like, oh my gosh, is that a mouse? And I was like, no, it's not. Keep talking. And then it did it again. And that's when I jumped into my seat and I knew that we were live. So I muted myself and then started to stand on my seat, which is what I think you guys maybe saw. And then realized you could see me, and so I took the video off too. And then soon after that, I was standing on my desk screaming at this, what I thought was a mouse, running around the floor underneath my desk.
And you know what the lesson from that experience is? Even though the show is only, chest high, always wear pants.
Exactly. I was like, that's the last time I'll only get dressed from the waist up.
Always wear pants.
No more PJs from the waist down during the show, just in case.
Yeah, well, after you left, we Tim and I think Scott was there with us, we got a lot of flack from the people out in chat who were saying, y'all, what are y'all doing continuing the show? You need to find out what's happening with her. Maybe she's in trouble. Maybe there's somebody in there, after her or something.
I know. Oh, well, that's the way I felt. Like my heart was racing, and I probably stood on my desk for 10 or 15 minutes screaming, even though I couldn't see the mouse anymore. And come to find out, it wasn't a mouse. It was a rat, which is even better.
Yeah.
But
you were texting me. I was getting updates. You didn't say axe murder in house, running for life.
Right.
But so we knew you were safe. It was just something was going on.
Well, the moral for everyone else is that you don't want to miss a show, because who knows?
Who knows
what could happen?
Tim and I are going to start releasing rats into your house.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. I'm driving down to Atlanta now.
Yeah. So tonight we have a special guest, Jim Davis. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing excellent. How are you guys?
Doing great. And Jim is our first landscape photographer. And as my boys get older and they're still in sports, but I'm looking for other avenues, other things to shoot. And landscape is something I'm really into. So I'm so excited to have our first landscape photographer on here, and to learn from Jim. So.
Well, and aside from it just being a landscape photographer, it is Jim, because his work is amazing. And so to start out with someone who's already so accomplished and has such great stuff, it's a real treat for all of us.
It is. It is. Jim has got some incredible work. We're going to show a little bit of it tonight. And we'll have the links to his Google Plus pictures. Google Plus does a great job of displaying images. So we'll have a link to that. We'll have a link to his SmugMug, his page there, and so you can go out and see him. Because remember, like all things, when we show them here on the screen, they're not going to be their true quality. They're not going to be what you'd see if you go look at Google Plus or SmugMug. But you'll get the idea of the quality of that Jim is shooting. Some beautiful, beautiful landscapes. So, Jim, what kind of gear do you use as we get started into this?
What I use is Nikon DSLR, and I also shoot with Hasselblad medium format film camera.
Wow.
But I have two bodies that I'm shooting with currently with the Nikon DSLR, and a good selection of lenses and filters and that type of thing. you know, the type of equipment that you know, you would expect that somebody. I've been into this for 25 years, so you know, I've built up and acquired, you know, a fair amount of equipment, sometimes too much, but.
All right, we want to hear it all. What are your two bodies that you use that are Nikon?
And Kathleen won't know this, but this what he's about to say is really awesome.
Okay.
Okay, I'll start out with I shoot a crop body, which is a Nikon D300.
Okay.
I have a full frame body, which is a Nikon D3X.
That's the awesome one.
Yeah.
Which is an awesome camera, especially for landscape type work or something where you need a lot of high resolution for doing very large prints and that type of thing. And then I have a full selection of lenses. The Nikkor 14 to 24 2.8, the 16 to 35 f4, 24 to 70 2.8, 70 to 200 2.8, the Nikkor 300 millimeter prime lens, and then I have a whole selection of. I should say that I have a Sigma 150 macro. Okay. And then a whole selection of older Nikon manual focus lenses that I really love to use. They're all prime lenses that I'll just grab one lens and go out and shoot, just kind of as an exercise and creativity, so to speak.
That's awesome. I'm assuming that all of your older lenses fit on your newer bodies then? Yeah,
and that's one of the things I like with Nikon is that, you know, I've had lenses for a long time, and the backwards compatibility with Nikon is excellent. So I can use a 30-year-old lens on a 2012 body.
Yeah, I don't think you'd get that with Canon.
No, there was a point, I don't know if it was in the 2000s or maybe even a little bit earlier, where they changed their mount, which did not allow those older lenses to mount to the newer bodies.
Right.
Yeah, I inherited some lenses from my father-in-law that were at least that old, and they all fit on my new digital SLR. They don't, you know, it doesn't have all the new bangs and whistles that a new lens has, but it still fits and still works.
Yeah. Well, once you've invested so much money into your lenses, if you don't want to get rid of them, you don't want to have to be forced to get rid of them because of a mount size.
Exactly, and also there's something to be said for the old Nikon glass, which is very good. There's no AFS motors or VR features to break down. In very cold temperatures, sometimes the AFS motors will not work. So manual focus lenses are, you don't have to worry about them breaking down in those kinds of conditions.
And you mentioned very cold weather. We haven't said this out to the chat yet, but you live in Canada.
Yes.
And a little cold up there.
Yeah, it gets cold. Although we have had a mild winter this year, but yeah, it still gets pretty cold.
Can you do us a favor, Jim, and backtrack a little bit? We have, you know, a wide spectrum of listeners, anywhere from the hobbyist to the professional. And if you can give us a quick description of the difference between a crop body and a full body, that'd probably be really helpful for a lot of our listeners.
So a full frame body is the sensor is based on a 35 millimeter film, whereas a crop sensor, depending on the manufacturer you go with, is either a 1.5 or a 1.6 crop factor. So the sensor itself is a little bit smaller. There is advantages to that in the respect of, I use mine a lot of times for wildlife photography, where my telephoto lenses become 1.5 times longer effectively because of that crop sensor.
Oh, wow,
so
yeah.
A 300 millimeter lens will effectively be a 450 millimeter lens.
I like it for sports for that same reason.
Exactly. But on the same, on the lower end of the spectrum, for a wide angle, you'll lose the wide angle advantage of those lenses. That's why I carry two bodies, because now, you know, I have the best of both worlds.
Right. So if you're trying to get that whole landscape image in and you want all of it in, you're going to go with your full. And if you want to zoom in on something and get a little bit further than even your lens can normally get you, you're going to put that lens on your crop body to get you a little bit closer in.
Yes, exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. Now, one thing we didn't mention, I imagine most of your, let me ask, are a lot of your landscape shots done with a tripod?
99.9% of them are.
Okay.
Anything that I'm going to be doing seriously, and I know that, or there's a potential for it to be either saleable or something that I'm going to enlarge and as a print, the camera will go on a tripod. I do walk around where without a tripod, just to kind of work on composition and things like that, because it allows you more freedom for movement, and you don't have to keep setting up for each composition. So I'll walk around an area that I'm, say, scouting out, just with my camera in my hand and try different compositions and that type of thing.
Do you sometimes use a monopod for those type of shots, or are you strictly walk around and then tripod?
Yeah, walk around and tripod. A lot of times when some of the areas that I go to, I can't afford to bring out extra equipment for those kind of luxuries. So, I mean, I have enough camera gear that weighs my pack down. So, a monopod is not something that I would bring along, even though I do own one. I would use that for sports or even for wildlife, so that you're more mobile with wildlife as well.
Right.
Okay.
Now, do you have a particular tripod that you like the best, or and a ball head or anything like that? Any special equipment there?
Currently, I'm using a Gitsu tripod, and it's a 3541, not the long one. I got the short one because I want it to be more mobile and compact. And then tripod heads. Currently, I'm using a Manfrotto tripod head, but I'm going to be switching soon because it's starting to get worn out, and it's going to be time to upgrade. So I'm looking at either a Markins or a Really Right Stuff.
I have the Really Right Stuff BH51 or whatever that one is.
Yeah, and the
love
BH55.
that one. 55, that's it. Yeah, I love that one. I love that one. Now, this is something I've always wanted to ask somebody who was really into the landscape and using a lot of tripods. Some tripods have the center column, and some do not have the center column. I have one. My big one does not have a center column. It's the one I have the BH55 on there from Really Right Stuff. But I have another one that's travel that does have the center column. Do you have a preference to have center column, not have a center column?
My center column, I can remove it in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
So there are times that I do use it under limited conditions if I need to get a little bit extra height. Then if I need to get down really close to the ground, I can just whip it off really quick, and that allows me to get down, see if I'm doing some macro work or I want to get a very low perspective. I can do that very quickly. There are times that I take it off and just leave it off for a while, but I end up putting it back on again.
Okay, because I had heard that having a center column can sometimes make it your lens, the whole thing's less stable. But then I've also heard some people say, no, you can put weights below it, and it really doesn't make that much difference as long as you're not extending it all the way up. Yeah,
with the higher end tripods, I don't think it's a big factor with doing landscape work. If you're shooting with a big long telephoto for wildlife, like a 500 or 600 millimeter lens, it might become a factor. Because anytime you have the opportunity for, there's moving parts there, or where you have to tighten it, there is opportunity for possibly a little bit of movement between the column and the base of the tripod. Right. In that case, I would go with a columnless tripod.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned filters early on. What and these are filters, for everybody who doesn't know, that filters that go on the lens itself rather than a filter you apply in post-processing. What type of filters do you typically use? What's your favorite?
Well, most of the time I have a polarizer on. If I can get the effect that I want with the polarizer, say either through separation of clouds and sky, reducing reflections on water, things like that. If I know that the polarizer I'm not going to benefit from it, then I remove it.
Okay.
I also use the Stingray variable neutral density filter for doing long exposures. I have some Stingray graduated neutral density filters, and I also use the Lee graduated neutral density filters for my the Nikkor 14-24, just because it's a very big lens, like the glass on it is very big, so I had to get a specialized holder for that.
Yeah, anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about with neutral density filters, we'll probably be talking about that when we look at some of your images, but basically it's cutting out the amount of light that comes into the lens, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you can get variable amounts. Let's take 1 stop, 2 stops, 4 stops, whatever I don't know how big they go up to. Some of them go pretty high on how many stops of light you can cut out. So you can take a middle of the day shot of water and really get a really slow shutter speed.
Right.
Or it doesn't have to be middle of the day. It can be some other time too. Do you do anything with graduated filters?
Yeah. I have a full set of graduated neutral density filters, which I will use if I feel the need for it. If it's usually I can tell by looking at a scene if the sky is going to be beyond the range of what the camera can capture in relation to the foreground. Mm-hmm. Then I will use a graduated neutral density filter to knock down the sky maybe 1 or 2 stops.
And that was going to be one of the questions as we looked at these. When I look at them, none of them look like they're HDR. None of your images I look at look like they're HDR, but it looks like you got a great range from the brights to the from the brights to the shadows. So, are any of the ones we're going to look at tonight HDR?
I guess it depends on your definition of HDR. Images that I would use a neutral dense or a graduated neutral density filter, and it would have to be suitable for that application. Being if there's an uneven sky, you run into issues where that dark part of where the filter is you're gonna get an uneven exposure, say on a mountain or a tree. The top half of the tree will be dark, the bottom half will be lighter,
right?
That type of thing. So in that case, what I will do is do an exposure blend. So I'll bracket maybe 1 or 2 stops, 1 or 2 exposures, and then do a manual exposure blend in Photoshop. Okay. So it is HDR, but it's not that what a lot of people might think of what HDR is.
Yeah.
So I try to go for the natural scene, what my eyes see.
Well, and I like HDR. I have nothing against it, but I would look at your photos. They all look excellent range, but they don't have that HDR look. And,
yeah, there's definitely a specific feel to HDR images that are. It's just different. Like yours, like you said, looks exactly how it probably looked to your eye when you were there, and HDR sometimes looks surreal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I like some HDR photography where you get the tone map look and things like that, because it does work in some circumstances, and it all depends on the person who's taking the picture and what their intent is. So there's nothing wrong with it, and it's good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how do you choose your light? Do you have a specific sunrise, sunset, middle of the day? What's your favorite, or does it really kind of depend on where you are?
The subject matter is definitely the determining factor in what time of day I'm going to shoot. Some days, middle of the day is perfect,
mm-hmm.
Depending on where it is. A lot of times, though, we all like the golden hour light, which is in the morning at sunrise, and for at least a couple of hours afterwards, you get a really nice light. And then the same for the sunset. So a couple hours before sunset, the light gets really nice, where the sun gets lower, and you start getting the warm light. But also it brings out textures and details in the scene, instead of that kind of light that you see midday out in the open.
You have a few images that are of
Go ahead and pull the
stars.
person up.
Yeah. You have a few images that are of stars, and I could not think what possible lens you'd be using to get such a great... There's one specifically where it looks like it's a rock formation, and you can see the stars right through it. What
Mm-hmm.
lens were you using on that?
I believe that one was the 16 to 35. Now, that was taken at night, possibly. I believe it was around 11:30 or 12 o'clock in that range.
Were the stars really that vibrant, or did you kind of assist that in Photoshop?
No, they were there, and you could definitely see them. And that was a full moon night, so that's where all that light is coming from to light up the surroundings.
Oh, yeah.
It was bright enough that we could walk around without having to use flashlights. So that in combination, and this is the thing, is on a night like that with the moon, depending on where the moon is, the sky will be blue. It'll show blue in your images if the moon is behind you, shining towards the sky that you're shooting at.
Okay.
Or if the moon is off to your side, the sky will turn more black.
Wow.
So it's understanding all the aspects of light and how it affects your images that's really important.
On a completely different level that I've never even thought of before. I do portrait photography, and so all of this, I'm never shooting because there's a full moon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
Really
think that
interesting.
it takes two different levels of patience. You know, Kathleen has incredible patience with the people she shoots. I mean, sometimes her shoots has lasted as long as 8 hours. But I would imagine as a landscape photographer, you've got to have incredible patience also, and staking out your site to find when that right light is. Because you mentioned sunrise, sunset, middle of the day. How do you know what the best light is unless you have seen it in every light?
Yeah, and that's part of the planning process and the scouting process. You know, knowing your subject, using different tools to understand when the sun is going to come up, at what angle it's going to be, where it's going to set, where the moon's going to be, that type of thing. So there's all kinds of tools that I use to pre-plan, because if I'm going to a location, you know, 5,000 miles away, I don't want to go there and hope that I get the right light. I want to go there and increase my chances and be educated and knowledgeable about what I'm getting myself into.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
great.
very important.
And that's a good point. You know, if I'm shooting around my house, I can afford to go back every day I want to. If you're doing the traveling, like you said, or hiking to a spot, you know, it looks like some of your places you need to do a decent amount of hiking to get to. You want to have an idea of what you're doing.
Yes, exactly.
Well, what gives you the ability to be able to travel so much to do your work? Like, how did you get into this, and then what keeps funding you going?
Well, several things. How did I get into it? It's just I've always loved nature. So for me, it's a passion. And photography is just a natural progression. So when I go to the places that I've traveled, even before I was a photographer, I wanted to capture those and bring them home. So that's where that started. And I wanted to convey to the people that I wanted to show them to, or that were interested in seeing my images, the feeling and the emotion that I had when I was in those beautiful places. So, you know, that's pretty much where that goes. And over the years, I have tried different types of photography. I did do weddings for a while to help pay for equipment. And keep in mind that I do work full time.
Okay.
As well as the photography is on the side. So my income from my current job, you know, funds a lot of my equipment.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
So do you prefer to shoot alone or with somebody? What's your preference when you're hiking? At one time, I saw a video of you. It's on your SmugMug account.
Yep.
It looked like you were in a fairly remote location by yourself.
Yeah, that location is actually an urban area.
Okay.
So it's not all that remote, but I love it because you can step into that gorge and feel like you're out in the middle of the wilderness.
Yeah.
I mean, the dangers are still there. Just because it's near an urban area doesn't mean that, you know, people have died in that area. They've fallen off cliffs and that type of thing. So you still have to be aware of it. But I really like to shoot on my own some of the times, because it allows me, there's no other outside influence, or you don't have to worry about, you know, a friend that's coming with you and that type of thing. You can really get to know an area and immerse yourself within the environment to really get to know it. But then again, I also like to go out and shoot with people, with friends, and I usually have a very few select friends that I will shoot with, just based on, you know, relationships and that type of thing, and how we get along and we know each other and how we shoot. So it's always fun to share those experiences with other people as well, you know, in real time instead of just with pictures.
Right, because it has to be somebody that's going to be compatible with you. If they're going to want to go out there for 3 or 4 hours or a half hour and leave, you know, they're not. You need somebody that has the same level of patience, I'd imagine.
Yeah, you don't want to bring a non-photographer out with a photographer, because it ends up becoming an exercise in frustration for both.
Yes. Yeah, that's. I generally do all mine alone for that same reason.
Yeah.
So do you find that, like, who are your largest clients and stuff for your nature photography? And do you find that you're typically shooting and then selling what you have shot, or do you get commissioned to go shoot certain locations?
I wouldn't say that I guess clients are just the general public, people that I would sell prints to. And I do have people that ask for certain types of prints. Do you have this? Do you have that? So I'll say, well, go into my library and show them some things. And if they have a specific request, you know, I always encourage people, you know, if you're really interested in something and you have something in mind, let me know, because it may be something where I have a future trip planned, or something that's nearby that I can go and shoot it.
Do you find that your market is, you know, saturated with a lot of landscape photographers, or do you feel like you're kind of going at it and pioneering as far as the area goes?
I don't know about pioneering, because I mean, you know, photography, landscape photography is very popular.
Right.
Very popular. You know, with the explosion of the DSLR market, where the general public has the ability to buy these cameras that take really good pictures. And you know, I would say that, yeah, there's a lot of competition out there. So, but what you have to do is, no matter how much competition is out there, that the people that have the passion and have the drive will always come to the top.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's something that I'm looking towards. I mean, I work full time, so I look towards my retirement, which I'm going to retire early. That will be the time that I will go into high gear.
Right.
Yeah, I always think right now that I'm not that I'm putting in time at my current job, because I have a great job and I try to work very hard at it as well. But I look towards in 5 years, when I'm eligible to retire, that's when I'm going to really, really jump into it and push forward.
You do not look old enough to be retiring in 5 years.
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
No way.
Yeah. Well, let's.
Well, one question, Jim. You had said earlier that you use the DSLRs, both the full frame and the cropped version, but you also said you use the Hasselblad. What do you use that for?
Yeah.
Is there specific shots you're using that for?
And currently, my focus with that is purely black and white. You know, with the color, I can do that on my DSLR, but just to work with black and white film, it's a chance for me just to slow down and really become focused and see. I do black and white on a DSLR, but working with a medium format camera, and it's a totally manual camera, so there, you know, it's just kind of takes you back to the days when it was film and you really had to know what you were doing as far as exposures, apertures, shutter speeds, and things like that. And it's a square format as well. So the square format is something you have to learn to see square when you've been used to seeing it in a rectangular format for so long. So yeah, it's just a time to slow down and really enjoy it and focus.
You feel the quality from the medium format is better than digital SLRs still?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's better. I think that they're probably the full frame DSLR, say for instance the D3X, would probably eclipse the film as far as image quality. But the film has a different quality to it. The film grain, you know, it's something. It's like, I don't want to compare it, but it's like an old sweater, right? It just feels good.
Yeah.
Feels good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get that. There's a specific image. I don't know, Mike, if you can pull it up, but it's the picture of the rock in the water. It was in Ontario.
Yes.
And I do portrait photography, so I'm always exposing for my subject.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like in this image that the rock is perfectly exposed, your sky is perfectly exposed. So what do you expose for? Do you expose for your sky? Do you expose for your subject, which in that image I think would probably be the rock?
Yeah, I mean, there's key elements within the image that are the you know, the most important aspects. And you definitely want to make sure that those are exposed properly. But what I do is understanding the dynamic range of a camera that you use, and you expose so that your highlights are not blown, and also that your shadows aren't too dark, so that you can bring them up. Now, an image like this one here, this is actually
number 3, Mike.
Number 3?
Yeah, number 3.
Was this one? And Jim had created a special gallery for us, so I don't know if this was this in your list, Jim?
Let me just check because I had the stream paused.
I'm kind of messing things up here.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I'm talking about a different one. So you're talking about the one with the boulder in the water and
Yes.
the sun rays. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that obviously is the main subject, with the supporting element of the sky with the sun rays coming down. Now, this image here is a 5-image exposure blend.
Okay.
Wow.
So what I've had to do is manually expose for the shadows, the midtones, the highlights, and I had to do it in 5 stops in order to accommodate all the different ranges. If you try and do it in 3 stops, a lot of times you have problems blending them together.
Mm.
But there are certain things within that image that I have left dark because I didn't want them to become competing with the boulder. So the rocks that are in the water, I've left them a little bit darker.
Mm-hmm. It almost frames the subject being the main boulder because they are darker, almost like a natural vignetting.
Yeah, yeah.
Within nature itself. This is my favorite shot, by the way. My personal favorite.
So this is HDR then?
Yeah, that would be a 5-image exposure blend.
Well, you did a great job with it.
Dynamic range. Pardon me?
You did a great job with it because I can't tell that it's HDR. I mean, that's just really good.
Usually it's surprising because you got water, which is obviously moving, so that's hard to get a good HDR image out, I would have thought.
Yep. Yeah, there's different techniques that you can use to reduce ghosting and things like that. Water's not a big deal in that situation because it is moving. Sometimes that soft look really enhances the picture.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say about that image is, usually when I get home from a trip, I know there's going to be certain images that I really want to get to first.
Mm-hmm.
That was an image that, or a series of images that I had passed up on my first selection.
Oh.
What I find is that sometimes you need to go through them and kind of let them percolate in your head for a bit and look at them and they end up coming to you. Like, there was a reason why I shot it. The composition is very strong. The lighting was nice. But I did that first.
That's so great. What I love about it too is that, like you said, the composition is very strong, with the boulder being on the left side of the image, and then the rays are originating from the right side of the image, and so it's balancing it off perfectly.
Exactly.
I mean, God couldn't have done it any better. There it is. It's beautiful.
And one of the things with images is you have to think that every portion or every quadrant of that image is important and has to mean something or add to the image. If you have an area of the image that doesn't really add to the image, then you have to question whether you want it in the image or not, because then it becomes dead space.
I love that.
Very good. Because I think that's something, like, for me, that's very difficult, is the composition. You know, how I can see a beautiful image, but that's where, you know, the skill of someone like you can take that beautiful image and transform it to the photo, where I'm just going to take a photo of the general area and not come up with that. So that is, you know, what you just said is something I really need to think about and slow down. Part of my problem is I don't slow down enough.
Yeah.
I just wrote that down because I think that's a great thing for no matter what field of photography that you're in, that every quadrant or portion of that image needs to add to the image. Otherwise, it's just dead space and it needs to be eliminated. Because it's so true. There are so many images that I take where I lose sight of what's important, and I need to get it all away and focus on what my intent is of the image. It's really great.
And you mentioned this is the 5 image. Do you do that in Photoshop, or are you using Photomatix or something like that?
Well, I actually use several different programs depending on the effect that I'm trying to go for. I do use Photoshop. I do have Photomatix, but I don't really use it a whole lot. Like, I did try it out a few times, but I just wasn't happy with, because what it does is it's not intelligent as far as the program goes. It just kind of puts everything together and then spits out what it thinks is a balanced exposure. But what it ends up doing is the highlights become muddy, your darks become not dark. You know, it kind of averages everything. And then there are times where I do it completely manually, where I'll bring it into Photoshop in layers, and I'll brush in and brush out, erase certain areas in order to bring them in to help balance the image. So
do you bring all 5 images in first and then check your exposures and then do the blending, or do you just go ahead and blend because you got the exposure exactly the way you wanted it in camera?
Well, first, what I'll do is I'll bring them into Photoshop and make sure they're all aligned properly. Do any fine-tune editing maybe on each image to make sure that I get the exposure on that image proper, and then from there I will start to hand blend them.
Do you find that you're more of a levels guy, or do you prefer doing things in curves?
More so in curves. Curves, it definitely gives you more control as far as that goes. Levels is good, but you just don't have the control that you do in curves.
Yeah. So,
my issue, okay, so I'm going to show a weakness that I have. My issue in curves is that because there are no parameters, like stop here parameters, it makes me nervous that what looks good to my eye is not technically correct or would look good to someone else's eye. And so I get nervous in curves because of all the options that are just available to you with nothing telling you stop here. When I work in levels, I'm just basically bringing it in before I clip ends, and it keeps me in certain parameters. And so I think in order to use curves, you have to be more grounded in what you know what you're looking for as a photographer. And with you having all 25 years of experience, that gives you the confidence to say, I know it looks good to me and I can trust that. I don't think that I've hit there yet, so I stay away from curves personally.
No, for me, it's like the eye doctor. Is this better? This better? This better? This better?
Exactly.
I don't know. It all looks the same.
Hours flipping between 2 images saying, I don't know. Am I crazy?
Yeah. And one of the things that you have to do as well is you have to, capturing the image is only the first step. And so you have to have the processing in mind. You don't have to, but you should have the processing in mind as you're taking the picture. Okay, how am I going to process this later so that you understand that whole process from start to finish? That's very important. One of the things that I do use Lightroom. So what I'll do is any images that I feel might be a little bit outside the dynamic range of the camera, I will shoot them multiple exposures, and then but I will also try to get it in one shot. And when I do that successfully, a lot of that processing is done in Lightroom. Lightroom is it's a very powerful program. Anytime you use separate brushes, you can use up to however many brushes you want, and I consider those to be layers. Every time you select a new brush, you're adding figuratively a new layer.
Okay.
And I mean, there's, especially with the Lightroom 4 beta coming out, it's pretty amazing.
Have you tested it?
Yeah, I'm using it right now. Yeah.
And you're a fan?
Go ahead.
I've been playing with it too. I've got it loaded into one of my machines and I'm playing with it.
Yeah.
And I like the map feature. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then that's about all I've used. I've used that and a few of the new brushes, the noise reduction, the white balance. So I haven't played with it a lot, which is a little bit.
Yeah, they've really improved it.
Did you have that image pulled up with the other rock in the water?
Well, I don't know which one.
I think it's the one you just had up.
Yeah, this is one. Let me go to.
Yes, this one.
This one.
If you scroll down so they can see the actual.
There you go.
That part. I had a question about that. Was the water in real life really that clear that you could see underneath the water?
Yeah. That area there is absolutely amazing. The color of the water, it's that green turquoise color, very, very clear. It's also, even in midsummer, it's very cold water. And
where is this?
This is on the Georgian Bay, just off the shores of Bruce Peninsula in Ontario.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
So when you take the picture and it's that green color, the water is, and you pull it up straight out of camera, does it still look like that green color, or do you enhance it in Photoshop to bring back the luster that you saw with your eye?
Well, what I shoot in basic RAW.
Okay.
I don't have it set for, I don't have my saturation set high. Everything is default settings, and that color is there. But anybody that shoots RAW, you know that your images come in and they look kind of bland. And
they look dull, flat, right?
So you do have to bring it up, but that's where you have to. And I do use. Well, I shouldn't say I do use. I take pictures with my phone every once in a while as well on things that I might need to question, because they actually do a pretty good job of capturing what it looks like.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah. But I mean, I usually spend a lot of time in these areas that I shoot, so when I bring those up, I try not to oversaturate. Right. But everybody sees differently. We all have our what we call our mind's eye. So what is, depending on how you feel that at that time, you may have a different perception than somebody else.
Sure.
Or some people are a little bit more perceptive, and they may see more details, you know, with colors and that type of thing. So yeah, it's a matter of my images. I want to keep them as natural as possible. So I don't want to go overboard with the saturation and things like that. So.
Now this one's gorgeous. Can you tell me a little bit about how you chose to compose this one? Yeah. Or was there anything special about how you chose it?
That's hard to explain. Because I've been doing it for quite a while, I just see things like that. I use what I call, well, everybody calls, is there's the rule of thirds technique. And it's not that I look at something and say, okay, I got to put the rock here because it fits in this part of the rule, and this. You just start to see like that. The more you do it, it becomes like second nature. So when I compose that shot, it's natural. To me, it's natural to look at it. Okay, the rock's going to go here, the side of the cliff here, the sky here, so that everything flows. So when you first look at that image, usually what happens, most people will see that rock in the water. That's like the impact that people see.
That's where I go, yeah.
The way the cliff kind of swings in and around and then up, it draws your eyes right through the image up into the sky. So there's a natural flow to that image.
Yep, it does that for me too. I see the rock, and then I follow the edge out to the sky. Yep.
So then that's what you want to do is you want to, it's like a story almost, or the flow through the image. You want to draw the viewer through the image, and this is part of, you know, utilizing the space that you have to make sure that every element is supposed to be there, or there's no elements that are that don't add value to the image.
And somebody out in chat's asking if we can explain a little more about rule of thirds. And I don't know if you had another image that you might want to explain it, or just explain it with this one. What the rule of thirds
that one's fine. So the rule of thirds is you break up the image into like a tic-tac-toe pattern.
Yeah. And
wherever there's converging lines, those would be focal points where you can place your subject, different subjects. And keep in mind, it's only a guideline. It's not like you have to do this and you have to do that. It's just a guideline to use for composition. And what it just helps, like I said before, to bring the viewers, to draw the viewers into the image and throughout the image. So you think of each one of those, what I referenced before was the quadrants. Make sure that whatever's in each one of those third quadrants, that it's important to the image. Okay. And the converging lines, where the lines come together, those would typically be where you would put main elements of the image. So in this one, the rock and the water would fit in the lower left quadrant at the converging line, and so on throughout the image. And the sky is in the top left, you know, predominantly. Yeah. And then the cliff is on the right-hand side. So, you know, this is a good example for the rule of thirds.
It almost looks like to me that as far as your lower left quadrant, the point where it touches almost looks like to me it would be right on the light part of that rock. See how the very top of the rock is dark, and then it lightens up as it curves around almost towards us. If in my eye, the rule of thirds, your point is smack on that light part, which is perfection.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that I don't think about it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go, okay, I don't hold a grid up and say, okay, this is how I'm going to compose it. It just
Right.
becomes natural the more you do it.
Yeah.
And there are some cameras out there that'll actually have a focusing screen with it in there to help the beginner learn how to look for that to kind of get the image to that point.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. Yeah. I think
And that's a good tool to use.
Well, I haven't checked on my 5D Mark II if it has it, but I know in previous Canons that I've owned, there was an option to always have the rule of thirds grid on my screen, when I look through my viewfinder, and it's very helpful to kind of have that up. Except, I will say that in portrait photography, we're always using our autofocus points, and it's really smart to put one autofocus point on your subject's eye, and so if you also have the grid up, you might be missing focus. But for landscape, do you use your autofocus points, or do you usually have them all fired up?
No, I use points if I'm using autofocus, but I don't always use autofocus because sometimes I want to be very specific in where I'm focusing, and I also do focus blending sometimes, depending on the depth of field that I need.
Yes.
And for clarity. Certain lenses have what they call a sweet spot for sharpness, around f5.6 to 5 or f5.6 to f8.
Yeah.
So
you talked about that before. Yeah.
Is that every lens, or is that certain lenses?
No, every lens is going to have the sharpest aperture, although some really good lenses have a lot of really good sharp apertures, but there's going to be one that's going to be the sharpest.
So for most lenses, between 5.6 and 8, that's the sweet spot.
Depending on the lens, if you get your kit lens, it may be an f4 or f5 lens, it's going to be higher than that.
Well, how do you figure out what your sweet spot is per lens?
You can test them. So what you would do is select a static object, focus on it, and then move through your apertures.
Okay.
And then bring it up into whatever program you use at high magnification, and then from there you can compare the sharpness between each image, and then It's also a good technique for learning when diffraction starts. So as you get up into f11, f13, you start to see diffraction coming into play, which is a softening of the image due to light diffraction.
Okay, right.
So I try to avoid sometimes higher number f-stops due to that, although sometimes you have to if you want to get a longer exposure or more depth of field. But that's where I will go to say on the 14 to 24, f5.6 is pretty much its sharpest aperture. So I'll do a focus blend, maybe 6 images at different points throughout the photograph to get
So you can keep your aperture where you want it.
Exactly, and keep it. You get a really, really sharp image that way.
Yeah.
Jim, what exactly is focus blend? Because I've never actually heard of that before.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that question too. Is it basically HDR theory but with focus?
Exactly. So what you do is you'll focus on your foreground. You'll take an image. You focus and keeping it within the depth of field of that aperture, and you want to have a little bit of overlap of your focusing, and focus all the way throughout the image. And then you take, say, those 5 or 6 images, put them together into Photoshop or whatever focus blending or focus stacking program that you use. What it will do is it'll take all the sharp pixels and throw away the other ones.
Nice.
So everything is sharp.
So there's special programs outside of Photoshop that will maybe more automated to do it?
Yeah, there's Helicon is one of them. Photoshop does have the focus stacking or focus blending feature built into it. It actually works pretty good.
Really? I've never seen that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go. Okay, that's what I'm doing this weekend. I'm gonna try that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now I want to step one thing back. When you're saying testing the sharpness, when I've done it, I've tried to do it with something that had text on it. Maybe like your box behind you that says f-stop.
Yeah.
Something like that, because it's easy. It may be a little bit smaller text than that, but it's easy to see the sharpness of your lens that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted you to see if you can pull up one of those pictures where he has the soft flowing water. Mike, do you have one of those?
Well, I have a list here, so let's.
Okay, cool.
We've already done this one, so do you mind if I go past this one, Jim?
Sure, absolutely.
And This is one from this weekend that you'll see coming up here in just a second.
Oh, man.
Let me see if I can zoom in.
Is this one of those times where you had to use one of your older lenses so it wouldn't freeze up on you?
No, actually, it was a very mild weekend. So the temperatures, although that looks super cold there, it wasn't that bad.
Okay, well, what's not bad in your definition? Because I'm from Georgia.
Well, that was around what would be 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. That's really bad for me.
Right at freezing.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so this image here, this is on Lake Huron, on the western side of Bruce Peninsula. And what happens is the wind kicks up and it brings moisture off the lake, and it blows the spray up on shore. And these are is cedar trees that have become encrusted in ice.
Wow.
And what really attracted me to these is that they look like an otherworldly type creature, or call it whatever you want, you know, creatures from the abyss or from the druids or shapeshifters, that type of thing, because the features on them makes them look like a creature.
It does. Do you ever use off-camera flash? Because it seems like this subject is really close to you, or is this what you're cropped at afterwards?
No, that's actually the full frame of the image. I do use off-camera flash, although on this occasion I did use flash on this one, as I forgot to bring my off-camera flash cable.
Uh-huh.
I don't have any radio poppers yet. Soon. So this was an on-camera flash, but I think it was at about -2 EV for the flash, so I really toned the flash down, so I didn't want to overpower them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just the shape of these images and we had been here 2 days in a row. So what I like to do is really get to know the area that I'm going to, and I'll return however many times it takes, you know, time permitting, to get the image that I want. And in this situation, it may take a little while to see the composition that I want. So I'll walk around them, look at it from different angles, and that type of thing. And here I got them. It looks like they're coming up from the lake onto shore.
Yeah.
In that respect,
And that was trees?
Yeah, those are cedar trees that have become encased in ice.
How tall are they?
I would say the tallest one would be about 5 feet tall.
Okay.
That's so awesome.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It's amazing they don't break after all that ice on them. Now that's water spray, I guess, from the lake then.
Yeah. And what happens is as they get encrusted in ice, the tree no longer supports the ice. Now the ice is supporting the tree, so to speak. So
Now, this is one that you were kind of talking about. This is not one of the ones you mentioned, but this is a new one of his. I think this is from this weekend, right?
Yeah, this is from this weekend as well.
So you have part of the element that you were talking about, Kathleen, is that slow-moving water.
Oh my goodness, this is amazing how some of it's frozen and some of it's just still going. And my question is because I'm not doing landscape, so I'm sure I'm not the only one in here that doesn't know this, but what kind of shutter speeds and apertures are you using to achieve the soft flowing water look?
Well, anything above around 1/4 second, it depends on your taste, will give you that effect.
Okay.
So the longer your shutter speed, the more of that effect you're going to get.
Okay.
Well, then you start to lose details,
Okay.
which isn't always a bad thing, depending on what your personal preference is.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's rocks under the surface of the water that you want to capture some detail in, then you want to have a little bit shorter shutter speed so that detail's not lost.
Right.
In this case, if you take a look at the left side where there's a rock that the water's going around,
Mm-hmm.
if I was to leave that on, say, for 30 seconds or so, that you start to lose detail in that rock.
Because enough water is splashed over different sections of it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all things that you want to keep in mind. There's times where you'll have some beautiful colors in say, a stream, but you still want the flowing water effect, so you're going to shorten your exposure enough to retain the detail in those rocks, yet give you that effect.
Okay.
And now, this is going back to something you said before. To get this, you might have to use one of your neutral density filters, right?
Yes.
To slow down the shutter speed. Because you also had said that, as you don't want to just keep raising your aperture up to its maximum, f22, f20, whatever your lens goes up to, because you get diffraction, which is basically degrading the image.
Oh, wow,
So
yeah.
you can't just keep going forever. The lens, I said this in a previous show, but lens quality, the sharpness of the lens, is not a perfect bell curve, but it's sort of like that. If you think of it as a bell curve, at the wide open range, it's going to be a little soft. In the middle somewhere, maybe not exactly in the middle, is going to be the sharpest, and then toward the end, it's going to start having problems too, as you keep stopping it down. So with that in mind, you can't just go your lens and stop it all the way down. You have to use something like a neutral density filter, which is going to cut out your light in order to get the shutter speed you're looking for.
Exactly. I never realized that was that would have been one of the reasons for it, because I've never used a neutral density filter, and I definitely need to get one.
Yeah. Also, choosing the time of day and the lighting conditions is very important as well. There's a lot of times I don't shoot water like this when it's midday because it becomes too bright, the light's too harsh.
Okay.
And what happens is you have issues with the water being blown, the details blown, gone. So I choose certain times of day. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll say local areas or wherever, it doesn't matter, but I'll be up at 5 in the morning, and I'll go there and wait for the sun to start coming up, and you get that nice diffused light coming through into the forest.
Yeah.
But midday, then you start getting hot spots or rays of light that they're really super bright, and then you can't balance the exposure. So that's one of the things that, with waterfalls and streams and things like that, you really have to keep in mind.
Well, neutral density is not going to change the quality of the light. It's just going to change the quantity, right?
Right, yeah. So, you could use a neutral density filter midday, but you're still going to have
hot spots
with the tonal range or the dynamic range.
All right. Oh, this next one coming up is just absolutely gorgeous.
One of the things I'll say about this one as well is going to smaller scenes. Like, everybody sees the big picture.
Yeah.
And then sometimes taking time to look at these smaller things is really, really important, because that's what makes up the bigger scenes. And they get lost within the big scenes. So sometimes it's really nice to just, kind of slow down and look at the small stuff around you, look down at your feet, see what's around you, that type of thing.
So you're talking about the one before the one we got up now, the ice one? Yeah. That's a great tip, because I think a lot of us, like me, we think, well, I don't have the same access as Jim, I can't travel to Canada and that kind of stuff, but there's beauty all around us, and we don't have to necessarily find that wide open gorge somewhere. We can narrow it down to a smaller thing and find beauty all around us.
I'm so with you, because I do all portrait photography, and on my wish list right now is the 100mm macro, because I'm doing newborns. And for example, with my 3-year-old son, one of my favorite things about him is his lips. They're just gorgeous, but I can't focus just on his lips because my lens won't get there for me. It won't allow me to get that close, and I just want a huge picture of just his gorgeous lips on my wall, so I need the right lens.
You're going to need to wait for him to sleep too.
I want him asleep, exactly. And you're absolutely right. The reason why I like it so much is because the little things are what make up the big picture about him. And I love that you talking even in landscape photography to find the small things.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now on this image, I'm sorry, Jim. On this image, it's just the lighting, the color, the composition. My eye kind of follows it through the canyon. There is just gorgeous. The water, the leaves. This is one of my favorite of yours.
Yeah. So this is the subway in Zion National Park in Utah. This is an instance where this was not taken at the golden hour in the morning or late in the evening. This was taken midday.
Really?
And this is where a scene like this excels, because what's happening here is we're getting reflected light coming in. If you come here first thing in the morning, the light's very flat. You don't see the vibrant colors that you would normally see midday. So you get that reflected light. So for some people that don't know, this is called the subway because of the effect of what looks like a tunnel at the back of the image. it almost looks like a subway tube. And what happens is you get the reflected light that comes in there, where you can see at the beginning of the on the far right, on the right top corner, where that light comes in, that reflected light comes in, and then it reflects all over the place, back and forth, and gives it that nice warm look and the rich colors. And I mean, when I first, I've seen images of this before, but you don't realize it until you get there, really how beautiful that is, and amazing, the way that the formations, you know, this is all created by nature. The color of the water is that green, and that has to do with, you get the algae that grows in the bottom, and then that color comes through the water. Just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, do you also have like diffuse light from trees overhead, so it's not direct sunlight coming in?
Yeah, at this time, this was taken in November of this year, so the light's not, or the sun's not going to be getting really high in the sky where it's actually shooting right down into this area. So we didn't have an issue with that. But you know, if you come in the summertime, say in July, where the sun's going to be high up in the sky, then you will have issues with really harsh lighting coming in.
When you're standing in these amazing places, are you blown away at God's creation, or are you thinking, how am I going to capture this? Like, are you thinking all photography, or are you thinking, are you blown away at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that, I'm the kind of person that, I mean, I photograph this because I live here, so when I go there, it's not all about photography. It's about absorbing and taking in all the beauty around you, that type of thing. And I really believe that you have to spend time in places. You can't just walk up here, take your pictures, and then leave.
Right.
You have to spend time there and really get to know that area.
I feel like that's why I love newborn photography, for the same reasons. A lot of people shy away from it because it's a long process.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I like about it. I have to take the time to find what's beautiful. I have to stick around for a long time to get that baby exactly in the most natural, restful position that I can. And then I'm like, ooh, there it is. And it's worth it. It's worth it when you stick around for it.
Yeah, and you have to understand the personality. Everybody has their own personality. So you need to get to know the baby or the child that you're photographing in the same respect.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And in this scene, you got to get to know the area, walk around it. I imagine you don't just walk right up and shoot. You walk around it and look for your angles.
Yeah. And what I will say is that usually the first few images aren't any good. They're not where you want them. I use the analogy of, it's like warming up for a race.
Okay.
You know, if you start a race without warming up, you're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah.
I am with you all the way. Every time I shoot, my favorite ones are at the end somewhere. It's never the first couple of frames.
Got to walk around, stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get to know the area, and you start to see different things. When you first walk up in a situation like this, you're kind of, your judgment is kind of clouded. It's so beautiful, and you don't see everything. But as you walk around and you look from different angles, and all of a sudden everything starts to come to you. You know, the compositions just kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
We have a question in chat. They asked, was this shot a multi-exposure shot?
No, this is a single exposure.
Yeah, that is incredible.
Yeah. Amazing.
And here's the thing with this diffused light, is that the light is balanced very well here, so there's no need to do a multiple exposure.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier something about shooting the manual. Do you always shoot in manual mode?
Yes. Anytime I'm shooting landscape, I shoot in manual. If I'm shooting my son's soccer game, I'll put it in aperture priority or shutter priority. But as far as this goes, it's all manual. I don't want the camera making a decision for me. I will spot focus off certain areas, check the histogram to make sure that my highlights aren't blown, and everything's where I want it.
Very good. Okay.
For those of you out there that haven't shot with your histogram in view, I would challenge you to try that, because it's really good to get to know your histogram. Eventually, your eye starts to know what your histogram is going to say almost. But it's a really good thing to start looking at your images in terms of the histogram versus in terms of just the image itself. It really helps you to balance things out.
And I like the highlights too. I like the blinkies, whatever you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll use the blinkies, but I always end up turning them off because if it's blinking at me, that's where my eye's going, and I lose track of my composition. And so a lot of times I might turn them on just to make sure for a second, but then they go right back off so I can focus on what
that's a good
my
point.
subject is. But that's just personal preference for me.
Now this looks like a crazy person's shot. I don't like heights. There's no way I would be up there.
Yeah, that was taken. That's to show the photographer in their element.
Yeah.
You know, that's a famous place. Everybody goes to shoot, Mesa Arch in Utah, in Canyonlands National Park. And what we did here is my camera took the picture. We set up the composition, and at this location, everybody comes for sunrise. They shoot it, and then 15 minutes after sunrise, everybody leaves.
Okay.
Wow.
We stay there. It was around 9 or 9:30 in the morning, and as you can see in that image, the light is still very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, light's
if I
great.
can give anybody advice is, stick around, really get to, because what happens is the sun hits the cliff wall below and reflects up. And that's where you get it underlit like that.
Mm.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
Really enhances the image in that regard. So yeah, it's just a shot. Now that arch is very robust. It's very thick. It's very wide. It's about 6 feet wide.
Okay.
There's no, unless you stumble and fall, which could happen.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I don't recommend people do that.
Yeah.
But,
Now, is that you up there?
That's me up there.
Okay.
So what we did was we set my camera up, got the composition, and then my friend went up there. I took pictures of him, and then I went up there, and then he took pictures of me.
Okay.
Love it.
So it's one of those things that I can keep for myself when I look back when I'm old and gray and say, yeah, that was me. And
I know if I was able to get up there and take this and be in that photo, it'd be on my wall.
So my question is if you're up there shooting, what's the resulting image from you being up there?
We didn't actually take a picture while we were up there. What we wanted to do is like I said, putting the photographer in their element.
In their element, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you'd have that on your wall. I do have it. I blew it up to, it's on a canvas.
Nice.
48 by 32, so it's big.
Oh, gorgeous.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, it's probably one of the few times you're actually in a picture.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I just had at one of my sessions, one of my clients picked up their iPhone and was snapping pictures of me as I'm photographing and posing their baby. And it's a crappy little iPhone picture, but I love it because I never get to see me doing what I do. So you are fortunate to have an actual gorgeous shot of you doing what you do. It's beautiful.
Yeah. No, that is good. And this is again in Utah.
Yeah.
That is gorgeous too.
Mm.
So
were the rocks really that orange color?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
This again was taken midday, and what happens is the light from the sun comes in and it bounces back and forth off the walls and creates that orange glow. And it's something that you have to experience, because if you go there in the morning, the colors are very kind of bland. Even they are still orange, but they just don't have that glow to them. Mm-hmm. And when the light gets really good in there, it's really, I guess you'd call it a magical moment. Like it's just, you look and it's just like, wow, that is beautiful. Mm-hmm. So that image there, I call that spirits in the rock. Mm-hmm. And if you look on the left side, I see a lot of faces in there.
Yeah, I do too.
Wow. Yeah, I do too.
And so that when I was in that area, it's one of those places that you just sit there and look at and you say, wow, like that's amazing. And
kind of God's version of Mount Rushmore, right?
Yeah. and you can't just always take pictures. You have to stop and look at it and enjoy it. And I spent a long time there photographing that and just looking at it. And so my intent on this image was to, if you take a look in the Virgin River, there's a V formed by a chute of water where you see the darker water, and it forms a V. And I do a lot of canoeing, and a V is something like a passageway through the rapids. So metaphorically, that's a passageway into the image, and the feel of the draw of the water brings you into the image, down the rapids where the rocks are, and then up into the canyon walls.
Yeah.
Now, were you standing in this picture?
Yeah, was I standing?
Yeah, you were not in a canoe for this picture, obviously.
No. We hiked up. So yeah, you can't.
So you had a tripod in the water here, I guess.
Yeah. The tripod's in the water. Yeah, and it's just such a beautiful place.
Who do you use right now for your prints when you order prints?
I have two places. One locally in Toronto that I use for canvas, and then I use SmugMug down in the States for metallic.
Okay.
And what I decided,
you're printing everything either in canvas or metallic. You don't just do like a luster.
I have in the past, but once you see a canvas or the metallic, you just don't want to go back.
Especially with landscape, the metallic I'm sure is stunning. It's not great for every application, but I could see how in landscape it would be perfect.
Exactly, and say for certain black and whites, you may want to go to a matte finish. You know, it depends on the application, and I may decide to go with other print finishes. You know, like you said, depending on the application. But for the type of photography that I do, vibrant colors and that golden hour, you get that luminescence off the metallic prints that is just amazing.
Yeah, I can imagine. So when your clients order, do you sell? You obviously are selling them a print. You're not selling them your digital image.
No, that's something that I have to think about for the future. You know, for licensing and things like that. That obviously, if you're licensing, you're going to be selling the digital file to whoever. That I will allow for that type of download, but I haven't set that up yet.
Okay.
And just like I knew we would, we're not going to make it through all 18 photos.
I know. We always go over because there's so much great stuff. I mean, this image right here, was this one done with your film camera?
No, that was done with the DSLR. I didn't bring it down to Utah with me because in that situation, I don't want to bring two systems. It adds weight and complicates things. But that image there, when I saw it, it was black and white. That's the way I saw it. So that's the way and it helps to envision things, like I said before, how you're going to process it later. So
yeah, I like that. That's a good tip.
That I want to do in black and white. So therefore, I'm going to, understand how I expose it and how the colors are going to translate into black and white.
Yeah, that's great. As we wrap up, and I told Jim before in a pre-show that there's no way we'd make it through all these, which gives us an opportunity for us to have him back. But is there, of the 18, is there one you really wanted to talk about that you want me to skip to or something?
Let me just quickly check the next page. Yeah, it's always a tough one.
Yeah, I know, because you had so many good ones.
Beautiful.
I guess for now, down a couple more images, there's two water scenes. Maybe if we could squeeze two in, because
Yeah.
So
which
look.
go to that one or the next one. I'll let you pick either those two.
And then another one after that?
There's another one after that. So either that one or the next one, and then another one. So pick one of the two.
Kathleen, which one you want to do? This one?
Oh my gosh, why are you making me choose? All right, I think Anita from chat likes the one before, so let's talk about that one.
Let's talk about
right
this
there.
one. Let's talk about this one.
So
no wonder you're not listening to me. I had it on mute.
This is Spencer Gorge. That's where I did the video. This area is about 20 minutes from my home. I can go there anytime I want, and I really know this area. I go there all the time to kind of escape and unwind and really spend time with nature and just just absorb it all. So this is a waterfalls that I've shot many times. Each time I go, I try to shoot it differently. And on this occasion, obviously it was autumn. And I saw this composition, and I just thought that the way those leaves were there, one of them was on the rock, the other one was kind of off to the side, so I did place it. I placed the big yellow one.
That's what I was going to ask.
Sometimes we have to do that to...
Yeah.
But yeah, just the way the flow of this, the way the water's coming over the ledge, you know, to me it just works. And it's not the entire falls, and this is part of sometimes where you can not include everything, right? Because we don't see everything all at once. What we do is our brain extrapolates what we see in different segments and then puts it together in our head.
Right.
So what this is just taking a slice of that image or a slice of that scene, what I felt was a very strong composition with the rock and the leaves and then the waterfalls coming over.
You know what's crazy about that leaf is that's right where I go. You know, I love the water. The water is just gorgeous, and even the background is gorgeous. But to me, that leaf is almost like, I guess when you're making a real nice dish and that final thing you put on to like finish it off, to me that's what that leaf is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, my mind, this is my crazy hippie style, but now I know where that leaf lives. I know what its life is like. How amazing is that?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, you look at the trees in the back, it almost looks like a painting. It doesn't even look like it's real back there. It looks like the water's there, the rock up front, but the back almost looks like it's a canvas of a forest scene.
Mm.
Yeah.
So one last image that I would like you to show would be the shot with the tent and the canoe.
Oh yeah,
I love that one.
And you know, I just
oh my gosh! Stop.
I was going through some of his images, and he's got tons of good ones. So we're not going to show it here, but you know, everybody go to his site and look at those images. There's one of a moose that's in the water, just a great photo of the moose, but it's just covered in flies. I thought, oh, that poor moose just ducked in the water. And you captured all the flies on it in such incredible detail. It's a really great shot. But okay, so back to this one.
I want you to show this image because this is how a lot of times I travel to get my pictures.
Mm.
Just me and a canoe, and I've traveled up to 250 kilometers by canoe and by foot.
250 kilometers?
Yeah.
And what do you do when you get to the end? Is there somebody there to pick you up?
Well, it depends. Sometimes it's in a loop, or I get dropped off by train and then picked up again by train out in the wilderness. There is drop-off points where they just drop you off in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, so somebody in front of you gets on the train with their bicycle, and then you come dragging a canoe?
Well, carrying it, but yeah. So this is, you know, this is my element. This is where I get away, and this area here is Temagami in northern Ontario. It's a very well-known place, very beautiful, and yeah, I'm out there by myself, me and my camera equipment, taking pictures, and just.
We are dubbing you the Boy Scout photographer officially, and we are giving you all of your badges, all of them.
So that 250 kilometer trip, how long did that take you?
Well, it depends. I've done 200 kilometers in 9 days. I've done 250 kilometers in 7 days, which would be a river trip. Okay. So point to point on a river. So obviously you can make more time on a river. This trip here was approximately 150 kilometers with very little river, mostly lake travel. Obviously I can't canoe down the river that's in the background there, so I have to portage around the rapids or waterfalls. So, you know, a large variation in the types of trips that I do, but most of it's to get to places that most people can't get to, and that's what I like to do. Is it's great to go to the national parks where everybody goes and capture those iconic locations and those scenes, but it's also great to get out and this is what I will tell a lot of photographers starting out, is it's great to look at and have somebody to follow and learn from and try to maybe emulate their style, but at some point you have to break free from that and stop chasing other photographers and start creating your own images.
Yeah,
So
very good point.
what I do here is that very few photographers ever go to these places, and it gives me fresh eyes.
So you got a pack full of gear, photo gear.
Yeah.
Obviously enough food to last you the 7 or 9 days, and a canoe.
Mm-hmm.
That must be a good workout carrying that canoe around.
Oh yeah. So on this instance, this was a 2-week trip. So I had 2 weeks worth of food, and you would be amazed at how much 2 weeks worth of food weighs.
Oh no, I could think that would be a lot. Plus your gear, and that canoe can't be like a 20-pound canoe. That must be 50 to 60 pounds at least, right?
That one there is a cedar Dacron canoe, and it's 42 pounds.
Okay.
So it's for a wood. It's a wood canoe. It's fairly light.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
that's still 42 pounds.
Yeah, I have to do multiple portage.
Okay.
So some portages I could do maybe up to 30 kilometers of carrying my gear in a day in order to get around certain places.
Wow.
How do you protect all your gear when you're out in a canoe?
It depends. I've been canoeing for many years, probably. I don't want to age myself, but I'll say 35 years, and I'm very confident in my skills in the canoe. So sometimes if I'm going on a river trip, I will bring a Pelican case and put everything in it just in case I spill. If I'm going on a predominantly lake trip, I won't bring a Pelican case, and I've never had an issue with that type of thing. So
yeah, and for people who don't know, the Pelican case is that metal case I guess it's waterproof too then?
Yeah, it's actually like a composite type case, and it is waterproof. Yeah.
Okay.
We have one question from chat before we go.
Yeah.
They're asking about the moonlit campsite photo. How did you get the sky so sharp and beautifully colored?
Is that in the group here, or do I need to?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's this one right here.
2 images to your right.
This one.
That one right there.
Yeah. So that's a full moon shot, and this is where I talked about before, with the moon was behind us. You can see by the shadows where it was kind of almost directly behind us, or sorry, behind what we're looking at.
Right. Sure.
Not behind us in the picture.
Behind your subject.
No. Yeah. So the moon was, when we're looking at the picture, it was to our backs.
Okay.
Not to our backs in the photograph.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
So this is where the light of the moon is making the sky blue and illuminating the landscape around us. So very balanced exposure, and that would be about a 30-second exposure. So what we do is we put our timers on and we run over there and sit down and then stay still for 30 seconds.
You guys stayed incredibly still. That is, I don't see any motion blur in you guys.
So to give you an idea of what photographers do when they're done photographing their subjects during the day and the night, is we go back to camp and we do more photography.
Yeah, I bet.
I love the shadows of the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this is one of those
And the sky, of course.
guys, that you have to go to his site and look at it with your full screen, because what you're not seeing in the little thumbnail is how amazing the stars are in this photograph and how vibrant and clear they are in the actual photograph on his site. So take the time to go to his site, look at all of his stuff, and you've got to see some of his nighttime shots with the stars, because it's just amazing.
Yeah. It is. He has a ton of amazing shots.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I feel rejuvenated. I feel inspired by what you're doing here. I love how you're not cut and dry, all technical or all feel. Like, you're such a great balance of the two, which I think you need to be a really great photographer. I know for me, I have moments of technical and moments of all feeling, and still hoping and working towards the meeting in the middle like they have for you.
Yeah.
So having you on the show has been really inspirational for all of us, and we're just really grateful that you came on. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Couldn't agree more.
One thing that I wanted to say, Kathleen, with what you said, is that once you become comfortable with your camera and the techniques, and you learn the basic foundation of skill photography, is that the part of it becomes natural, and then that's where you use the emotion and the feeling and and that type of thing to convey that in your photographs. So, it's the technical part just becomes part of the process.
Second nature almost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the non-technical I really need to work on. I'm going to go out this weekend and be a little more patient and try some of the things that I've learned here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
People in chat are already asking when you're going to be on next, but we won't make you commit to a date.
No.
But we want you back for sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I would
Couldn't
love
agree
to come
more.
back.
Well, because you look at Jim just this past weekend took a ton of incredible photos. By the time we have him back next, he'll have a whole new gallery put up.
That's right. And
Yeah.
inspired by. We love it.
Yes. So thank you very much, Jim, for coming out. We'll wrap up here in just a second. Before we stop, if you're not part of our Facebook group, make sure you go out there and join that group. We've been having a lot of great discussion lately out there in that group. And Kathleen forgot last week to recruit or to draft.
Oh, failure upon failure.
For Manual Monday. So do you want to, and Jim, what we're doing there is in our Facebook group, we have Manual Monday where you give a tip on shooting in manual. Tip Tuesday, which can be anything, which was a bad thing for me to do because the show's Tuesday. And that's my Google Plus asking me if I'm still there. Yes, I'm still here. And then Photo Friday, where we just show our favorite photo of the week. Doesn't have to be the best technical, it just has to be your favorite and tell us why it's your favorite. So Kathleen, who are you going to draft for Manual Monday? And they can go ahead and do it.
Well, since it started off with you and it came to me, I think it's only appropriate that Tim is next.
I must be muted. I'm muted. I can't hear you.
You're muted. When you mute your mic, not your speakers.
What? I can't hear you. Can't hear you. I'm going to have to come up with something. I'm going to be away this weekend skiing, so it'll be a perfect time.
Listen, it's not just come up with something. We're looking for knock your socks off material.
Yes, I know.
And I want to know what ended up happening to the mouse or rat.
Well, we put out poison and traps galore. I think there were like 11 or 12 traps down here. And we never caught anything with a trap, but there is no more thumping and no more squeaking and no more running across the floor. So we're thinking and hoping and praying that the poison got it.
So that thing that's underneath your desk right now moving around is not a mouse?
Stop it right now. Every time I hear something like the air conditioning turn on, I'm like jumping and looking around to make sure I'm still okay.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and end the show here. And Jim, thank you very much for coming out and hang out for just a second as I end the show. Everybody out in chat, thank you for coming. Next week we'll be back, same time, same place.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Next week, guys.
Good night, everybody. All right,